is built upon the work of folks like Theron. It only exists because there are Black folks, liberators in our community who have kept up the tradition of making sure young organizers like myself know the history of Black resistance and Black resilience, and know how important it is that we have an analysis of abolition, not just abolition of chattel slavery, but abolition of the criminal punishment system, of policing, you know, which is steeped in chattel slavery, is rooted in snatching up Black people as property. And as someone who went to law school to practice in a system that is very rooted in white supremacy and rooted in anti-Blackness, Black August really serves as a grounding point, you know, a time to really reflect on what does Black radical militant thought teach us about getting our freedom. And about doing that, you know, a lot of folks will say at all costs, by any means necessary. And knowing that that is not about violence, that is about self-defense. That is about acknowledging that the first violent act has been the state actors. And in fact, Black folks and Native folks for generations upon generations have been exceedingly patient here on Turtle Island, waiting for a white supremacist government to meet our demands. And so standing on the shoulders of so many ancestors and elders and the tradition of being resistant and resilient, I really reflect during the month of August about what does it mean for me to honor that tradition? What does it mean for me to be constantly learning and studying? And how does that reinforce with values and principles the work that we're doing right now through the Defund movement, the work that we've done through the No New Youth Jail movement, the work that we're doing with the Free Them All campaign throughout the state of Washington, you know, because the Department of Corrections is just as much a part of this problem, or the Department of Incorrections, Department of Chaos. And we have to be thinking holistically about the system we're dismantling, but even more importantly, what I gained from Black August is the vision of the world we want to build. So many of the revolutionaries we studied during this time point us to understanding what does it mean to be liberated peoples, what does it mean to be healthy, whole, and thriving, and what does it look like to have our bodily and spiritual and mental autonomy in a world that, in a context that was not built for that. And so really honored to be on this panel, and even more honored to be sharing space with KT, who's one of our community aunties, really guiding us in the ways of knowing how do we stand on abolitionist principles.
Thank you so much, Nikita. Nikita's my hero, one of many, you know, well, not many, I'll say, but in my community, she's one of my heroes. I love her, I trust her, and I know that whenever she goes and she's speaking the voice of my community. So it's an honor to be with you as well, my sister. And I am a native of Seattle, Washington, born here. I went through the school I'm a survivor of the school to prison pipeline at age 16. I was in Washington Correction Center for Women, was formerly known as Purdy. And I didn't get out until I was 21. So I have firsthand knowledge that didn't work for me. I got a lot of knowledge that I didn't need. And it was very psychological, mental, and physically torturing to have to go through that. So I say that because I think it's important that our children are loved on and supported with other measures other than going to juvenile or going to prison, or even being caught up in that racist system. I am out here, been out of prison 16 years, and I'm actually doing the work now. I'm an anti-racist organizer with the People's Institute. I am a member of the Village of Hope. I am interim chair of the Lived Experience Coalition of Seattle, and I just believe in change. I believe that anybody can change. I believe that everybody's valuable. I believe that everybody deserves a safe, nice place to live. I believe everybody deserves a chance to thrive, a chance to have education and a job where they can afford where they live, and they don't have to be in a program or a system that is only meeting a short-term need, like a shelter, you know, or those other places that I've actually lived in, transition homes and stuff like that. I think that people deserve to be treated fairly, you know, with equity and equality. And so in doing that, uh, there needs to be a whole wraparound approach to people in need. And so I am with the movement. I am with the defunding of the police. I'm so proud of our young leaders for all the work that they're doing, that they're constantly doing. Gabriel, I remember you from seeing you perform so many different times and knowing the work that y'all have done with the People's Party. And I love y'all, and I'm honored to be here. So I hope that I can help in some way. It's a true honor. Thank you.
Absolutely, man. So much love. Since you both mentioned it already, one of the biggest discussions and things we're working for as a movement right now is the defunding of the police. And I know some people, when they hear that, they're like, "Oh, wow, that's really extreme." You know, for most of us, it's not enough, um, and it's one step in a strategy. How would you break down what defunding the police means? Either one of y'all could take that. For people that
I'll just give my take and then defer to Nikita, because I think it's taking away the privilege that they have and the way that they are not meeting the need. They're not protecting, they're not serving the community. They are very gang-like and very bullying and murderous, and you know, they're not serving the community. I'm actually afraid to call them. You know, I would rather try and police myself or police what's around me, what's happening, or defuse it, because I know that I'm not going to go in violently with my gun to I told them they come over here to my building. I live at the Liberty Bank building on 24th and Union, and they came over here like 18 deep for some kids that were arguing, you know. And I'm like, it don't take all that. And I'm like, you guys need to get out of here. And they were trying to get us to let them up because you need a like a fob to get up the elevator. And I was like, you guys just looking for somebody to kill, you know what I mean? And you know, when they approach us and when they stop us, it's not like humanistic. It's not I think I got off topic a little bit, but I just don't like how they treat us, how they dehumanize us, how they surround us and give us anxiety and antagonistic tactics and all these things to get us to, first of all, be uncomfortable, become angry, start maybe spouting off at the mouth, you know, and then that's how it starts. You know, they get you to doing that, and then they feel like they have a right to assault you, to beat you, to hurt you, to kill you. And I think that that is wrong. And so I think that defunding them and funding the community and investing in our youth and in our children and in our people, our elderly, disabled people, homeless people, people that are you know in caught up in drugs and alcohol as a mechanism to, you know, try to make themselves feel better, you know, a self-medication. I used to be an addict. That's why I'm saying that. You know, and a lot of people are not in a right state of mind when they're approached in the first place. And I feel there needs to be like some love involved in how you approach another human being to make sure that they live after the encounter. So I'm all for defunding the police. And that's all I'll just say. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll pick up where KT left off. This conversation about humanizing. Defund the police is certainly what people are chanting, but what I really hope people latch on to is the invest in community piece. What are we going to do with 50% of SPD's budget? That's $205 million. And if we think about that over a duration of years, their budget right now is $410 million. Very quickly, that adds up to a lot of money invested in a system that does not humanize people, does not care for people, sends an armed response when people are often hurting or in a traumatic situation. And typically what it does is escalate the situation. There is a fallacy that as a society we function on, the belief that police stop hurt or crime. And the truth of the matter is they respond after something's already happened. And so what does it look like to actually invest in a system that is preventative, that actually interrupts violence when it happens? And then the next step to that is that heals it. We want to heal harm. We don't want to leave people in a space of hurt, because when you leave hurting people hurting, you know how the old adage goes, hurt people hurt people. We create a society that just repeats hurt over and over again. And so while defund is about divesting from an ineffective system of public safety, it is more about investing in a system of public health and public safety that works for everyone. Because when we prevent harm and we provide care and compassion, we actually make the whole of our city safer. And really we have to think holistically. We live in a region where there's 14,000 people without homes. What do you expect when we allow a housing crisis to go so far that 14,000 people are not able to come inside? We actually are creating a context. We are creating a space where people are not able to live healthy, whole, and thriving. And it's my opinion that it is the role of the government that we pay into, that we elect people for, to take care of our communities. And I think that's also why it's important to understand the history of policing, to know that policing was rooted in being the patrol that went and captured runaway enslaved Black peoples. And that history, those roots, those white supremacist roots, continue to permeate the way in which policing is done. White communities are not over-policed. Black and brown communities are. And not only are Black and brown communities over-policed, we're often denied the resources we need to address the historical and generational trauma, the historical and generational disenfranchisement from the economy, from education, from healthcare, from healthy food that has been perpetrated upon us for generations. And so the defund movement, while it is about divesting from a system that doesn't work, it's even more about investing in a system of public health and public safety that promotes humanizing people, promotes the care and compassion of people, and actually ensures that, like, we don't have situations of harm. You know, we're not just responding to something, we're actually doing the work of preventing harm.
Man, so well said. I think it was Janaea Khan who broke this down the best to me. They said for white folks who are scared of defunding the police, all we want is an experience with the police that you already have. It's not that hard to imagine, if you're a white person in America living in a white neighborhood, to see what defunded police looks like, because it's actually just your experience with the police already. It's just the fact is that Black folks and people of color have never had that experience. So what is it about us not being over-policed that threatens you so much? And that should be the question you interrogate. You know what I mean? So shout out to Janaea Khan for breaking that down. Y'all are both solutionaries, I know, in the work that you do. And we know that when the police go away, and if we see a world without prisons, that crime doesn't go away. So a question that often comes up, and a question that we're always struggling with, is how do we keep our communities safe, and how do we build those systems to keep our communities safe and deal with harm even when it happens inside of our community? What are some of y'all's ideas and practices around that? I know that's a hard question, but it's a real one.
I'm gonna take a stab at it and say that, just using this scenario, if I'll just use myself, if I didn't have a place to live and I didn't have a place to be, and I had to use the bathroom, or I was hungry, I would go into the store and I would steal. I would eat. I have diabetes. If I take my insulin and I don't eat, I could go into a coma and die. People, when I go to the store and I see security chasing people behind food, I said, you guys don't have to do that. You guys have an insurance already set up for that to replace whatever came up missing. All that tackling and wrestling and hurting and harming and judging. What if it was you? What if you had to feed your kids? I think that, in my opinion, the systems are set up to make people desperate to be able to survive out here. And it's by any means necessary that they are trying to survive. They are trying to be out of the rain, out of the cold. They are trying to sleep. They are trying to rest. It's hard out here. And so I guess I forgot what the question was already, but I hope that helped.
Yeah, absolutely. The question was, how do we keep our communities safe even when crime still happens without the police and without prisons? But
yeah, just not calling the police, just giving food away, helping, like being human. Do you need, if I have, you have, you know what I'm saying? Giving them something, you know what I'm saying? When you see them, don't judge them. Oh, they're just going to use it for drugs. Just pray that they don't. And if they do, then so be it. I mean, that's not your business, right? So to me, it's just a human, it would have to be a humanistic approach to things that people are going to do anyway. Because I told the security one, after I told them off about what they were doing, I said, people are not going to stop doing that. They're not going to stop doing that because of the way the world is.
mm-hmm.
So get used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know.
And I also, that's great. And I also hear you saying, like, if you want to fight crime, you have to fight poverty. Like, if you really want to get to the root causes of it, right? Which is hella real. Yeah. Nikita, you want to take it away?
Yeah, 1000%. We have to be willing to address poverty and a lack of access in our society. We have created a society of haves and have-nots, and where we decide not just who deserves to get what. We've actually decided based on racial hierarchies, sexism, classism. We've decided who's valuable, and in that decided who deserves to be treated like a human being. One way that we can see this is when you think about the opioid epidemic. And a lot of white folks are actually the ones that are using opioids. And we've seen this particular epidemic be very humanized, as it should be, and talk about it as a public health crisis. But when you think about what happened with the war on drugs, when you think about what happened with crack, especially crack rock, Black folks were criminalized. So even the way that we approach things like addiction or substance abuse is highly racialized based on based on race, we've been told is of value. When I think about addressing harm, because you're right, harm is going to happen. I mean, even just think about in your families with people you deeply love. We hurt each other, and we have to find restorative, transformative ways of addressing that harm. But one of the things I try to tell folks, because this came up a lot during the No New Youth Jail movement, is what do you do with people who kill people? Well, reality is murder is one of the least likely crimes. And we cannot build our public policy based on extremes. We actually need to base our public policy on the treatment and the outcomes we want to achieve. And so it's really important that when we consider addressing harm, what does it look like to prevent harm, and what does it look like to heal harm? The current system we use is punitive, the criminal punishment system. It does not ask about harm holistically. It only asks about the victim that's been harmed. But in the juvenile system that I work in, oftentimes what we see is young people have been forced to make hard decisions, like KT was pointing to. I'm hungry. How do I get food? Sometimes a young person will steal something, and the response to that theft is usually to chase them down, wrestle them to the ground, and now the young person also has got an assault charge. But nobody asked, why is a young person hungry? Why does a child not have access to food? And we could have very easily prevented that whole interaction by ensuring that every child in our community, every family has access to healthy food. So what I feel is really important when we talk about public health and public safety is asking ourselves, as opposed to what do we want to stop? What do people need? People need access to housing, healthy food, healthcare, education, and employment opportunity, all the things that allow you to be sustainable and safe. And when we talk about substance abuse or the ways in which people are self-medicating, we need to think about the ways in which we've racialized dealing with addiction. White and wealthy people have the exact same drug use level across the board as Black folks. The difference is white and wealthy people have homes that they use drugs in, and as a result, often are not criminalized for it. And even if they are caught, they're usually offered services. This is not what happens in Black neighborhoods, where we tend to lack access to homes or safe spaces or the ability to use safely. That's why safe injection sites are such an important thing for actually decreasing overdoses and increasing a public health and public safety approach to addressing substance abuse. In the context that I work in with young people, we do things like healing circles. We're moving in a direction of acknowledging oftentimes when a young person breaks a law, it's because of a whole context or system that was wildly outside of their control. Where did we as a community fail them? Because real accountability, true justice would actually ask those adults that were responsible for supporting young people, and I consider myself one of those people, where did I fail and how am I accountable? And so we'll sit in circle with young folks. We'll sit in circle with people who are the alleged victim and figure out what can we do, what went wrong, what can we do better, how do we heal the harm? And the truth of the matter is, while a circle is effective, it is not efficient at putting people in a pipeline. And what we like right now as a society is the efficiency of criminalization. It allows us to stay detached. It means that we don't have to have relationship and we don't have to genuinely care about the outcome. We can just pull people out of community and put them in cages. But we know that when you cage people, when you incarcerate people, when you put them through a harmful criminal punishment system, we actually make things worse. Most people who go to jail and spend extensive amount of time in the prison system experience an immense amount of trauma, and many come out with the collateral consequences of a record. They come out with huge amounts of debt, and the likelihood that a person will recidivate in that situation is highly increased. And so we know that our whole system of public safety is not working, and it's actually not addressing harm, and it's not keeping us safer. And there are actually so many tools and tactics that social science has taught us that if we wanted to make the investment, we could make that shift. And it's going to require time. How do you shrink the Seattle Police Department and grow and strengthen the infrastructure of community-based, community-led responses to harm? And I don't expect that to happen tomorrow, but I do expect us to start, because the continued killings of Black and brown people across the country is not something we can tolerate any longer.
That's right. Hearing you talk about the circles with youth made me realize I should have probably asked this question earlier, but can you each talk about the organizations which you work? So Creative Justice and People's Institute, I believe. But y'all both are probably in hella other organizations that I'm not even thinking of. So however you want to answer that question.
I can pop in real quick. And then
ahead.
Casey, Creative Justice, as you can see, I'm in our classroom here at Washington Hall, but it's an arts-based healing engaged space for young people, some of whom are liberating themselves from the criminal punishment system, some of whom just decided they wanted a safe space to make art. You know, and the goal is to figure out how you use art as a healing tool, but also as a tool for storytelling and advocacy, because we know that young folks impacted by the juvenile criminal punishment system have the most brilliant solutions to dismantling the school to prison pipeline and investing in alternatives that actually work. And so our goal as an organization is simple. Let's make art, let's heal, and let's speak truth to power. And that's what we do every week.
And I'll just quickly say too, I appreciate that. That is so beautiful. And she's right. They've been working with them kids for years. That is something that I've always dreamed that I would be able to do. But, you know, I still feel that I'm able to do it, like through the Village of Hope and the People's Institute. There are a lot of young people in families. We meet with the parents and they bring their kids and stuff like that too. And we just get them right through, like sending them through Freedom School. And and other ways, you know, it's like it takes a village. And so the kids are a part of the village. So, you know, I don't personally do that work per se, just specifically for children or teenagers. But when I encounter young people, I'm always ready and willing and able to, you know, give love and direction, care and concern to them, and understand their needs, understand their thoughts and how they're feeling, and what I can do to encourage them, like by speaking up boldly is something that people I think get from me, because I'm not afraid to speak truth to power, and I will always speak truth to power, because I'm not afraid of the system that already incarcerated me in my youth. I feel like they already owe me. So I'm always going to speak truth to power to them. So, you know, as I sit on the governance board and talk to the mayor or whatever, I'm always speaking for the people, and being accountable to the people by coming back and saying, hey, this is what happened, or this is what's going to happen. I need you guys to come out, support, do public comment or whatever. And we do encourage our youth to always speak out. So, and to know who they are, that they are geniuses, and not to let anything stop them. And so, you know, because of the things I've been through, I'm able to use my testimony to help others that may be going through the same thing or close to it, how to navigate it, and how to stay, you know, grounded and knowing who you truly are, and that you don't have to make that decision. So that's what I will say to that.
Beautiful. My next question, I realize I probably should have like emailed y'all ahead of time, but I'm making up questions as I go, to be very honest with you. I just, you know, I knew we were going to have a good conversation, so I wasn't tripping on it too much. But so I'm gonna ask this question and then I'm gonna give my answer. So I give y'all like at least a minute to think about it. So the question is, you know, since it is Black August, and it's a time where we look and we study from different Black liberation struggles and movements. What is one story from, and it could be from anywhere, but a story of Black liberation that inspires you, that you think of a lot? And for me, when I think about that question, the first one I think of is the story of Assata Shakur. For anyone who hasn't read the autobiography of Assata Shakur, it's one of my favorite books. It's beautifully written. And she was, you know, a revolutionary, a member of the Black Panther Party, who was wrongfully imprisoned. They said that she killed a cop. There's tons of evidence that she didn't kill anyone, and she actually got shot. She was abused horribly in the prison system. But they broke her out, and they broke her out of prison, and she lived underground for over 10 years. And the thing that inspires me a lot about her story, not just that she made it out, but that she talks about the time that she was in the time that she was underground, still in the United States, not in Cuba yet, not safe yet, that it was everyday folks that was keeping her safe. It was grandmas, it was aunties, it was church folks, it was people that were, you know, quote unquote, like outside of the movement, but just like Black community. Those were the people that were keeping her safe. And I love that story of everyone plays a role in our liberation. You know, everyone plays a role in the movement, and they don't have to necessarily like identify as activists or organizers or have the letters after their names or whatever. All of it matters, you know what I mean? And everyone can play a role for our liberation. So that's the part of that story that I always think about, that inspires me. For either one of y'all, if there's a story that, you know, from our history that inspires you, that you want to tell people about.
You stole my initial one. I read Assata.
My bad.
No, that's good. That's good. I read Assata when I was a freshman in college, and I would say the combination of going to Seattle Pacific University, a predominantly white evangelical college, and reading Assata was like an intersection of radicalization, of just like really starting to see things for what they were and asking myself, what can I do? But I also talk about Huey P. Newton. And what was inspiring for me was reading stories of him walking around with a constitutional law book, and then just like reading that at police officers and telling them what he knew about his rights, whether that was right to be free from searches or right to bear arms or other rights that he had studied. It really helped me just understand the value of knowledge. I did not go to law school, honestly, because I wanted to. Law school was probably one of the worst educational experiences I've ever had, just in terms of like being in a setting where intellectualism took over your humanity and a total lack of concern for the ways in which the law actually unfolds in incredibly unjust ways. It's where I learned the law and justice are not the same thing. But what I learned from Huey P was the ability to speak someone else's language in a way that kind of outdoes them and really humanizes you is such a powerful thing. And it something that felt like a very disempowering space. Learning about the way that he and other Black Panthers use their knowledge of the law and the legal system helped me think about, what do I use this knowledge for in terms of empowering myself and community. And so the other really inspiring part of that was the People's Law School that they had in Oakland, where they just disseminated the information for free. It was like, you could pay $200,000 for this, or those of us who have figured out how to learn it can partner with community and help people know how to represent and advocate for themselves. And that has really like framed my community organizing mindset, that anything and everything we do should be making community stronger. Like if that's not happening, if we're not building power in community, then we're doing the wrong thing. And so that's really shaped the way that I think about work, the way I think about building community power, and how I engage as a lawyer. I'm far from a traditional lawyer, and I used to be uncomfortable with that, but learning more about like our ancestors and revolutionaries has really helped me understand the value of taking information, figuring out how to flip it, and use it in a way that builds power and community.
For me, I said earlier, I have a lot of heroes. I think Harriet Tubman, Fannie Lou Hamer, Angela Davis are all people that I looked up to and aspired to, Coretta Scott King to be like. But my own story of how I overcame, addiction, incarceration, and how I'm still battling to overcome diabetes, and how I'm willing to die for what I believe in. I'm willing to stand. I'm willing to speak. I'm willing to yell. I'm willing to cry. It has been freeing for me. And I always want to encourage other women and men, but women especially, to speak your truth. Don't be ashamed of where you've been and where you're from. And when I think about people who like to jump on the bandwagon and say, yeah, Black Lives Matter, I want to see that in action. Like, what are you willing to give up? What are you willing to do? Are you going to risk your life? Are you going to risk your job? Will you talk to your parents and your grandparents and your boss and your supervisors? Will you speak for me? Will I matter in that meeting that no Black faces are in? Will I matter in that meeting? Will I matter in your vote and how you spend your money? So it's like, that's what I would say. That's what I encourage people to do, is to make me know that I matter. Make me know that it matters, because this didn't just start. This has been going on, and there's a lot of cognitive dissonance where people say, well, I wasn't there, or that wasn't me, or I'm not like that, or, all these things that they will say, but that silence is violence. That's something that came out this after George Floyd too. And I really appreciated that, because it is. Because it's time for people to speak out. It's time for people to get radical about this, radical about change. And it's time for people to put up or shut up, right? Don't just come and hashtag and take your picture and buy your t-shirt, then put your sign in your yard. Give up something. What are you willing to give up? Are you going to lock arms with me and stand with me? Are you going to die with me when they shoot me? You know what I mean? So to me, that's what fuels me. That's what, I mean, I can't get away from it. I can't run from it. It is what it is. I can't change it. That's me. And that's, you know, I didn't start that way is what I guess what I'm trying to say is I didn't start out like that. I had to go through to get to who I am today. And that's my say.
Man, much love, KT. Much love. That was so real. Nikita just put up some information in the chat. Nikita, I think you actually have to click to all panelists and attendees because I don't think the attendees can see it. You good? I just wanted to let you know because they should see that. Also, I'm gonna ask the panelists one more question. But in the meantime, if anyone who's attending has questions, feel free to drop them in the Q&A in the chat. We'll see it. Keeping in mind the parameters that Alina sent out. I'm just reading what's in the chat for people that might not have looked at it. I know that, or at least I think that most of the attendees are parts of different arts organizations. So I wanted to ask y'all how you feel like the arts is important and plays a part in Black liberation movements in this time. And what would you want these art organizations to know right now?
You know, Dr. Mims told me, I don't know if you guys know Dr. Mims, she's the founder of the Evergreen College in Tacoma. She started it in her kitchen and she's like 90 something years old and I just adore her, right? But anyway, she told me, she said, you're not a psychologist and you're not a scientist, you're an artist. Because I do spoken word, I do poetry, I write and I love to sing. And so I just encourage people to do that art because she said art is what's going to free us. That's what she told me. And I just thought that was very profound. She said it's not going to be my organizing. It's going to be art that frees us because it's, now she didn't say the because part. This is coming from me. But I think because it's so expressive and it's so profound and ingenious and beautiful, and I just I have healed through so many pieces that I have written as I was writing them, you know, and it freed me and it maybe freed the person I was writing about, or I don't know. I just love art. I think it's beautiful, and I know both you guys are artists too, so I'll stop there.
They say that if you want to get rid of a people, the first folks that you get rid of are the cultural workers, the poets, the storytellers, the songwriters, because that's who preserves the history and the culture of a people. And I know that when I look at the history of social movements, all kinds of artists, writers, poets, singers, visual artists, dancers, culinary artists have played an incredible role in preserving the culture of people, but also helping to make a movement viable. Art does something very special to the spirit. You can say something to somebody with all of the academic words and all of the data, but if you move them with a song or a poem or a piece of visual art, you actually can root or seed something in a person that can grow and create change. And so I think it's so important that we couple that our movements are artistic and cultural collaborations, because at the end of the day, long before laws change, culture has to shift. And if we know anything about what shifts culture, it is art. It is the creative work that we make. And as an abolitionist, I deeply believe that if we're going to change the world, we have to have the creative and imaginative capacity to imagine a world beyond police, a world beyond prisons, a world beyond incarceration and courts. We have to be able to imagine a world where people are all whole, healthy, and thriving. Imagine what it's like if everybody had food to eat. And it's artists. It is artists who help us do that. So the more that we can be creating spaces, platforms for artists to do that important cultural work, the more successful our movements will be. And I think that that art takes so many different shapes and forms. Like, I love that we've gotten to work with Amplify Art to develop, I'm looking at them right now, these images for defund the police, invest in community, free the protesters, and to see those up all over the city. Honestly, I know people don't always like graffiti. I love seeing graffiti all over the city that is like, you know, in different ways, putting the messages of the movement out there. I think that there is just so much power. I'll never forget seeing Northwest Tap do the What You Talking About, you know, and how people wanted to see that all over the city. But what they were doing was through rhythm and dance, getting the names of all the loved ones we've lost into people's hearts and minds, and hopefully in a way that people could no longer stand to add to that list. So creating space, platforms. If you work for an arts agency that has funding, artists are hurting right now and we need our artists. So how do we support and build them up and make sure they can do that key cultural work? If you work for an agency that has a platform that can be amplifying artistic voices and stories, please be opening the doors to that, especially to those marginalized and disenfranchised voices, especially thinking about like our Black trans artists, who often don't get centered, don't get seen, don't get heard, but have, you know, especially in the police brutality, the movement to end police brutality. If it wasn't for folks like Marsha P. Johnson, whose birthday was this week, we would by no means be where we're at. So if you have platforms, open those up. If you have funding, invest. And then as someone who works with young people developing art skills, there is something dynamic when you just put a bunch of supplies in a space, give a short lesson on how to do it, and let young people just create. The things that come out, what we've learned with creative justice isn't always about the end product. It is about the process of getting to a piece and the conversations that happen, the dialogue around what's happening in the world that we're in, and how that turns into art with young people is really some brilliant shit. So if you have access to supplies and opportunity for youth, please be putting that out there. I know it's hard with COVID, but we're creative folks and we live in a tech city. There should be no reason why we're not able to get arts resources out to young people.
Say that. I feel like we have a quiet attendee list. There's no questions that I've seen that have come through yet. So I'm gonna answer my own question too, because I was hella feeling what y'all said about art. Yeah, everything that was already said. And also, I feel like as artists, we have a secret superpower. I tell people this all the time, of bringing people together who might not see themselves in each other. I know this as a musician. I see it in my audiences all the time, especially when I used to do more shows, that people that have different backgrounds, different identities, that connect with something real in the story of the music. And when I bring them together in a physical space, or when they come together in a physical space, it's like the relationships that are built because of art are so much like the possibility in that is beyond anything that we could see. You know what I mean? So I feel like all artists have that secret superpower, whether we know it or not. We're bringing people together, and what we do with that is incredible. You know, I'm reading a comment right now from Alina. Okay. What would the panelists say to the arts and culture community that says we're not social justice organizations when discussing why they don't engage more in this work? Speaking specifically about Black Lives Matter and anti-racism, and what would it look like to build meaningful partnership and trust between the arts and culture community and the BLM movement? So that's a question from Alina. Good question.
Do you mind copying and pasting it into the
Yes.
chat? It was a long question.
It was a long question. But basically,
I remember the second part, I feel like I can address that. You know, it was really dope working with Amplify Art to have images created that reflect the conversation of the movement, and to partner with Stat the artist. And what was dope about it was you have this group that has built this platform, and they receive funds to essentially cultivate art in communities that reflects movements. And so they got together a group of organizers and activists. They got a bunch of artists together and were able to bridge our demands and the actions we were taking in the streets with what artists could do visually on paper. And then they had the skills, they had the network, they had the financial resources to see those images get printed and physically put out into the world. And so it ended up being a really effective collaboration of art being created, the message of the movement being amplified, and then because they had access to resources, everything from financial resources to printing resources to people power to actually get the images up, they really managed the process so that as organizers, we could focus on what we're good at, which is galvanizing people, being in the streets, drafting the policy, connecting the relationships, and then the artists could do what they were good at, creating, making art. And then there was a synergistic process of feedback that happened in that. And so I felt like as someone who's a part of the movement, that was just a really beautiful opportunity. Another collaboration that I think has been really effective is Hugo House allowed me to teach a class this summer. And that class focused specifically on using on movements and what does it look like to write poetry in a movement. And I was kind of sneaky about it because I used all R words like reparations, restoration, revolution. And every week my students worked through these words as a part of a connection to the movement. And so we were able to both have discussions about what's happening in our city while simultaneously creating art about it that's now going to get put out into the world. And so I think really, how do you engage well with Black Lives Matter as a movement is the kinds of accountable collaborations. What kind of accountable collaborations are you building with artists and community? And how does community get to influence the way in which that platform or those resources are distributed and affecting the art? In terms of anti-racist work, sometimes I hate this question because, you're afraid of giving the answer that lets people think it's like a one-time thing, read a book, watch a video, go to a training, and all of a sudden, boom, anti-racist art organization.
Right.
And it's a process. We have to constantly be engaging does it mean for us to be anti-racist? It's not enough to say I'm not racist. I don't say racist things, or I love Black people. You really have to be actively challenging racism. And I think one way arts organizations can be doing that is in funding. I don't know if y'all have had to apply for funding to the city of Seattle or the county or any other organization for arts dollars, but the reporting standards, the restrictions on the funding, like, to be honest, running an arts org, we really need unrestricted dollars. I need to be able to spend them in whatever area is necessary in our org when it's necessary, especially in the midst of COVID, where, to be honest, the needs of our young people and our artists are drastically different than they've ever been. And we're trying to go from doing in-person arts ed to doing digital arts ed, which requires a whole different set of skill sets and a whole different set of machinery that some of our young people don't even have access to yet. So if you have access to funding or dollars, making those dollars unrestricted and having just baseline reporting is really important to be collaborating, whether it's with individual artists or arts orgs.
And I'll tell you, Alina, I really didn't understand your question at all, and I kind of still am lost. Nikita kind of helped me along the way.
I can help with that too. So go ahead.
Oh, well, I just was going to say, I was just going to answer it in my way anyway. I agree with you, Nikita, about the funding with no strings attached is definitely needed. I'm just now getting into that realm and seeing what that's even all about. But I will say that being born and raised here, I don't like these ugly triangular boxes, these buildings they keep building. They're so ugly and they don't beautify this beautiful city. And so I would say, if we could think of a way of how we could incorporate the community into the architecture of whoever's we're paying to these architects to allow our youth to be able to paint, to draw, to do what they do, to beautify the ugliness. I call it ugliness because that building over there on 23rd and Jackson is ugly. The building across the street from me coming up right now is ugly. The building on the other corner is ugly as hell. The one on the where Richland's groceries used to get our chicken, well, is ugly. And even the building that I live in on the outside, to me, is very ugly. And I don't like none of them because they're ugly and they're too close together. And you know, the CD used to be beautiful. The people's houses, the different colors, people's yards, the grass, and all that kind of stuff. It used to be pretty, and now the money's coming, and it's creating some ugliness. So I want that gone, removed. I think that Jimi Hendrix Park is very beautiful. I like that, you know, but I just think that we need to stop putting boxes everywhere. You know, it's like if you got all that money, it seemed like you would be wanting to do something extravagant or something grander. You know, if you just blowing money all downtown with all them cranes, I call them peacocks down there, building this and building places where we're not welcome. You know what I'm saying? Least you could do is beautify it and open it up to the communities who live here, to the people that been here, to our ancestors who came here, migrated here, so they could thrive here. Allow their grandkids, kids, and kids to thrive and be allowed to be in those buildings. And I know I got off topic, but that's just me.
No, I think it's super related. So, my bad for just like reading the question to like, I know it was, but the part,
Gabriel,
say what now?
I just add one more thing.
Yeah.
Organization who's not a social justice organization and doesn't.
I was just gonna ask exactly that. So you're on it.
For them, you're wrong. Anti-racism work is for everybody, and there shouldn't have to be a Black Lives Matter movement uprising happening right now for organizations or businesses or individuals to feel responsible to be engaging in anti-racism work. It's everyday work. It's work that if you really care about having an equal society, we got to move through all this equity work first, and we have to all be about practicing. And I don't say being anti-racist, I say practicing anti-racism every day, because there is no point of arrival. It is a practice that we get better at, that we train our eyes to see, we train our hearts to better be able to see what's going on in spaces. We get braver about interrupting moments of racism when they're happening. We get braver about dealing with our own rough edges. We get more intersectional. We get deeper into the movement, but it's a process. And so every organization, especially if you're a nonprofit or social service org, anti-racism has to be at the heart of what you're doing. Otherwise, you're perpetuating the racist norms of philanthropy, the racist norms of the nonprofit industrial complex, which in a lot of ways was just set up in the first place to squelch Black anger. It was to keep us from being angry and standing up for what we deserve. So everybody should be committed to doing anti-racist work in their job, at their home, with their families, and in their self.
I absolutely love what you just said about anti-racism being an action and not an identity. Like, I just needed to say that again for people to like really like let that sink into your heart. You don't read a book and are cured of racism. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you exactly just took the question I was about to ask you anyways, which was the other part of Alina's question, which was what will we say to arts and cultural organizations who don't want to engage in this work because they don't see themselves as, you know, political organizations because they're just involved in arts. And to me, that like, I just wanted to say something on it too. That goes back to the age-old question of like, are we doing art just for art's sake? And I don't think there is an art that's not political. Even if you're making art that is non-political, that is a political choice, and you are agreeing with things the way they are. So just know by not engaging, you are engaging, and you're engaging with the other side right now. You know what I mean? So I just wanted to put that out there. Do you have anything you want to add to that, KT?
I was thinking when Nikita was talking, but I think I kind of forgot what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the relationship. The relationship is the most important part to becoming anti-racist, is relating with people in a humanistic way and not seeing the differences about them as being strange or whatever, like it's just knowing that you're human, they're human, and loving them. And the way you relate with me is, like, if I was going to say how somebody would relate with me in a better way, would be, you invite me in, you give me a lot of niceties, you treat me like I'm a queen, you know what I mean? I am a queen, and I want to be treated like one. That would make me really remember you, and it would make me feel welcome, and that you don't try to talk above me. You know what I mean? Just simplify it. That's all they got to do. They got so much going on with all the words. I'm like, oh, turn it off, right? Just talk to me. Go back to when you used to really just talk, not when you wrote your thesis. I don't want to hear that, right? Talk to me on that real. So, I just think that relationship building is very it's needed, and being involved on a grassroots level, meaning come down, come eat with me, come sit with me, come sup with me, come do things with me. Come enjoy yourself with me, unwind with me. Tell me about your problems. They want to hear our problems all the time, but they'll never tell theirs. So, that's all I was going to say.
Authentic relationships. That actually ties in perfectly to the next question that we had, which was, what does accountability mean to each of you? I feel like you spoke to some of it already.
Accountability is, I need to know what's going on. I need to know all the stuff behind the corner, behind the back door. I need to know what are we dealing with? What are the resources? Stop hiding the resources. Let people know what's available to them. Accountability is coming back to your community, not just doing something in the name of Black Lives Matter, but how are you attached to the Black community? How are you even, do you have a relationship with the community? You know what I mean? Do you meet with us? I just said it. Do you sup with us? Do you have dinner do you karaoke with us? Do you kick it with us? Accountability is bringing it back. Is actually effective gatekeeping both ways, and so that the community knows what's going on, and stop. I don't know. I don't like when people meet about us without us at the table, and they feeding on us, actually, because we're dying at a rapid rate, and that's wrong. And people are not just dying from being murdered, they're also dying from poor health care, from the inability to be able to get their needs met. So to me, accountability is making sure that everybody's needs are met equitably.
Say that. Yeah.
Yeah, when I think about accountability, I try to bring it down first to the personal level. Like, what are my accountable relationships with people that I'm doing this work with? And accountability means it's like a feedback loop. It is a way to be able to share where you are, what you're doing, and then to together in a collaborative way be able to ask questions about that work, challenge that work. If that work is not right and maybe it's doing more harm than good, to be able to say ouch and have somebody receive that and change what they're doing. I think when I think about that from our organization's perspective, Creative Justice, we partner very deeply with the young people in our org. In fact, like, I would say we are genuinely youth-led. Our youth decide who gets hired. Our young people decide, we will have hiring panels and their votes are weighted. They get to decide what are our projects we do, How do we spend the money of the org? What are the next steps or the growth or the evolution? And for us as an arts organization that say we partner with young people liberating themselves from the criminal punishment system, it's essential that young people have an immense amount of voice in how our org does our work, is growing our work. And eventually, those young folks that are on our youth leadership board, they should have my job. It should not be me as executive director in 5 years, because it needs to be a young person whose lived experience deeply reflects what our organization says we're trying to undo. And so when I think about accountability, I think about relationship. I think about the ability to account for an action or a lack of action and then be able to change that. And I think about it being genuine and authentic. Sometimes our accountability is performative. And by that, I mean, you say you're serving Black or Indigenous or Brown community, and you call the one Black, Indigenous, or Brown person you ask them what they think, and then you just move forward. And that's not accountability, that's performative. That's to be able to check it off your list. Where are BIPOC and QTPOC folks getting to be in leadership and decision-making positions in our organizations, deciding how things actually run, having an impact on the solution that's supposed to be on our behalf? That is a move towards like a real collaborative type of accountability. And I think nonprofits in the city of Seattle benefit greatly and often from the images of Black, Indigenous, people of color, queer, and trans people. But then when you go look at who's in the organization, who's getting paid by the organization, who's actually receiving resources, we're nowhere in that make. And we're certainly not in decision-making roles. So I think there are a lot of structural changes that when we just think of it from the organizational ways that people could be doing things differently.
I want to just tag on to that too and say that putting people of color in positions of power and that leadership development that Nikita was just talking about is very important when it comes to accountability, because we're supposed to be building our youth up, just like she said, to take her seat, to take my seat, to make them ready, you know what I'm saying? And that also is accountability. So thank you.
Absolutely. So we had 3 people all ask a very similar question in different words just now. So I'm gonna try to combine these. It's from April, it's from Heidi, it's from Anahi. And they're asking, what are some direct ways, some tangible ways that individuals of this session can engage with the work, with their arts and culture orgs that they're going back to? Just ideas and suggestions around that for their organizations. And Anahi adds, especially in ways that aren't tokenizing and just for that one day, week, or month when we think about a specific culture. That makes sense? Did I summarize it all right?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to address some different parts of this.
All right.
Tokenizing comes in place when we just use somebody's face or image, but that person has no power in the space or situation. And so I think it's really important that organizations that say they want to have accountable, meaningful relationships with BIPOC and QTPOC folks examine power in your org. What do an actual power analysis, a power mapping? Where do BIPOC and QTPOC folks have power in decision making and in how resources are distributed in your organization? And unless that is actually in line with making sure that we get to have voice in how things happen, then everything is actually tokenizing. There are so many arts orgs in Seattle that are predominantly ran by white folks, but say that they want to serve BIPOC and QTPOC young people and communities and families. And that is a type of nonprofit arts organization that's built upon saviorism. It cannot be for us if it's not by us, if we're not in it. So I think a lot of, and KT spoke about this sacrifice earlier. What are you, as maybe someone who may be in a position of privilege or have a privileged identity, what are you willing to give up to actually see our organizations be and practice anti-racism in a real way? And that has to go beyond inclusion. tokenizing typically happens when we want to be inclusive, but we don't want to change the way the organization or resources function. And we have to get to a place where we're willing to give up power, and willing to give up decision making to those communities we say we want to serve. Or actually, I try to say partner with. When I talk about the young people with creative justice, I always say the young people that we partner with, because they are decision makers. They are at the table. They are in an empowered space with not only who we hire, but how we spend our money and what projects we do. In terms of King County Equity Now and Decriminalize Seattle, one easy step is sign up for the newsletter. King County Equity Now sends out 3 newsletters a week where they let folks know what are the volunteer opportunities, what are the actions for the week, what are some of the key things that we can be doing, whether it's related to Seattle City Council, work in community, or around like resources that the organization needs. Any of you that work in arts orgs know that communications, arts, volunteer management are all things that are essential for making a coalition work. And a coalition like King County Equity Now has grown rapidly over the last couple of months. And people who have those skills that are willing to contribute those to King County Equity Now would be incredibly helpful. The other thing you might see is organizations that have resources or materials that they might be selling or putting out in the world. They're including the demands of the decrim movement on them. One thing that was hella tight was a beer company decided to pay the fee on their cans of beers that they're putting out right now. And so the message, one of the messages of King County Equity Now has been that there is a fee. Reparations has not been paid, and reparations means to repair the harm. And so this company decided they would help be a part of getting that message out to the people who purchase their product. So I think there are ways, but one of the easiest ways to figure out how to get involved would be to sign up for that newsletter. It goes out 3 days a week, and there are tons of volunteer opportunities and events and activities that are in that. And then the last thing I would say about taking anti-racism work back to your org is how are you as an individual committed to interrupting everyday acts of racism? They happen all the time. We call them microaggressions, but the truth of the matter is, like, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, and it does a lot of damage. And being able to get yourself to the point where you're willing to interrupt what feels like small moments can be a huge victory for our anti-racist movements if everybody were committed to doing that. The other thing is, ask yourself about the policies in your organization. Are there certain things about the way your org works that is keeping Black, Brown, Indigenous, queer, and trans people out of your org? One of the things that I point out to a lot of folks when I do consulting work is look at how you hire people. What do you consider to be experience? Is it these expensive ass degrees we get at these colleges that may or may not actually teach you anything? Or is it the lived experience that actually, you know, when the rubber meets the road, actually makes people very good at their jobs? How are we valuing the lives that people have lived above the professionalized, hierarchical ways that we determine whether or not somebody can do a job? If you want more BIPOC and QDPOC folks in your org, you're gonna have to understand that we have been systematically and historically marginalized and disenfranchised and prohibited from accessing these institutions that white supremacy says makes you valuable enough to work somewhere. And I bet if you looked at your policy handbook or the way that you do your hiring, you'd very quickly find that your actual hiring practice in your organization is making it so BIPOC and QDPOC folks can't get jobs there. But the thing that comes after that is changing the culture of a space. It's not enough to get Black and brown people to work for you and then think we're gonna be comfortable in a white supremacist culture. That's why people leave. Some of your orgs have really high turnover when it comes to BIPOC and QDPOC folks. And the reason that is because the space that we're working in with you is damaging, and we don't wanna be there. So maybe pay attention to the turnover, hear what people are saying in their exit interviews. People probably, you know, sometimes folks get fired because they have a quote unquote bad attitude. I don't have a bad attitude. I'm just tired of dealing with racism. And so maybe consider the culture or environment of your organization. It might be having really great impacts upon the people that work there.
Real talk.
I would just quickly say that that is why she's my hero. Because see, she breaks it down and she speaks volumes. And I felt like she was pulling it right out of my head. So that's why I love her so much. She is so articulate and brilliant. Nikita, I just love you. And I'm so glad you said that. And the only thing I will say is that if I'm gonna work for you, I want to feel comfortable working for you. I want to be able to be Black there. I want to be able to be who I am. That is very important. I don't want to be walking on eggshells or being stiff, and I don't want to be feeling like I can't wear my dashiki and my dreads or whatever. You know what I mean? And I can't really be me. So that's very important. But I love what you said. Thank you.
I think we're running up on time. I think this is supposed to wrap up in 4 minutes. Are there any closing thoughts that either one of y'all wanna say to the people before we up out of here? I appreciate you both so much, and thank you for everything you gave us today.
I just want to thank Alina for wanting to host this conversation during Black August, and you for emceeing. Emceeing is a hard task, and I think I say a lot of direct things, but also it's really important for me to recognize when people show up. For those of you who did choose to spend your last 90 minutes hearing from Gabriel, KT, and I, like that is a significant and important first step. And I would encourage folks, keep showing up, keep coming to dialogues, keep asking yourself those hard questions, interrogate your own feelings. Like, as this defund movement is happening, if things are rubbing you the wrong way and you're a person of privilege, maybe interrogate your feelings first before you interrogate the movement. That's the thing that I really want people to do. Before you come for the movement, ask yourself, why do I feel so threatened by the idea of a public health and public safety system that works for everyone without armed police? Why is that so scary? And what feelings does that bring up in you? I really encourage folks to do that self-interrogation work.
It was just a blessing to be here and to be in the presence of y'all. And I appreciate you, Alina, Gabriel, love you. I had a really good time. I'm blessed. I feel better already just from being with y'all. So thank you. And thanks to all the people that showed up, the attendees as well. Thank you all.
Thank you both. Anything you want to say, Alina, before we up out of here?
I always forget. Am I not on mute? Okay. I just want to thank each of you so much. I always, Karen, I know we have not had the privilege yet. I will meet you later today, of meeting in person, socially distanced, of course. But I'm excited to continue just to build relationships with other artists and with elders in the community. I'm glad that Dr. Perry connected the both of us, and I know that I have a lot to learn from you too. And Nikita, I just want to use myself as an example and just to highlight what you just said, because I know a lot of people, especially in arts and culture organizations, are grappling with, we're not a social justice org, but we've made Black Lives Matter statements, but are not necessarily addressing what Black leadership and community is asking for in the city of Seattle. And I think that is what we need to grapple with. And for me, I think the past 3 months, especially on my work on the Community Police Commission, I have been more uncomfortable than I ever have in my entire life. And that is good. That is good. It is about interrogating myself and not the movement, because I move about the world with a lot of privilege. There are other things that intersect for me as a person of color, and things with gender and sexuality, but acknowledging the privilege that I do have, being willing to go into those uncomfortable spaces and really question why that is. I think that is part of anti-racism work. And when we do that, when we commit to being uncomfortable, it benefits all of us while centering people that are most impacted by the systemic, institutional, structural racism and oppression. So I just want to thank all of you for speaking truth to power. It's always, I know the day is not over, but this has been the best part of my day, and I know it will continue to be. So I just want to thank each of you. I know that all of you are busy and carrying so much, and I'm just so grateful for all of your brilliance and for sharing space with all of us. So I just want to extend my gratitude again to each of you, and let me know, like, use me too, like put me on make me do some work, put out some asks for the folks that have showed up here today. You have my actionable solidarity, and I know that for the folks here too, this is really transformational. So I just wanted to say thank you. That doesn't feel like enough, but I appreciate each of you. All right, everybody, take really good care today. Please sit and ruminate and think about what was said today. I apologize for the technical difficulties. Also, Gabe, I missed your incredible intro. So in the email, I will try to recap what Gabe shared before I started recording, but I'll send out the recording so people can have that, if that's cool with everybody. All right, awesome. All right, everyone, take good care, and we'll talk soon.
All right, sure. Peace.
Bye.